world that we live in today, everyone likes an acronym, whether it's ABC, KYC or AML. But what do they mean to people outside of the industry? Hello and welcome to another KYC Lookup video where we bring you AML related content to help you enhance your knowledge in the fight against money laundering. Today we are going to explain what is a customer due diligence, when is it required, and what are the most commonly used documents. But before diving into today's video, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future videos. Oh, and don't forget to leave us a comment with any suggested topics you would like us to cover in the future. So, what is customer due diligence? Customer due diligence, or CDD as it is also known as, is the process and procedures companies follow to gather sufficient information on a new customer or existing customer, and to assess the risks of doing business with them, whether it's at the start of the relationship or once established. Why do we carry out the customer due diligence? CDD is carried out to protect the financial institution entering the new relationship being used directly or indirectly for money laundering and terrorist financing purposes. It is also set out in local law following the recommendations of the Financial Action Task Force that customer due diligence measures should be undertaken when establishing business relations, carrying out occasional transactions. These might involve amounts of money over a certain threshold or entities in high-risk foreign countries. There is a suspicion of money laundering or terrorist financing, or the financial institution has doubts about the veracity and adequacy of the previously obtained customer identification data. What are the regulatory obligations behind CDD? As the Financial Action Task Force highlights in Recommendation 10, financial institutions are required to take enough measure to determine they are comfortable and satisfied that they know who their client is before entering into a business relationship. In order to satisfy this recommendation, financial institutions should take the following measures: identifying the customer and verifying that the customer's identity using reliable, independent source documents, data, or information. Identifying the beneficial owner and taking responsible measures to verify the identity of the beneficial owner, such that the financial institution is satisfied that it knows who the beneficial owner is. For legal persons and arrangements, this should include financial institutions understanding the ownership and control structure of the customer, understanding and, as appropriate, obtaining information on the purpose and intended nature of the business relationship, conducting ongoing due diligence on the business relationship and scrutiny of transactions undertaken throughout the course of the relationship, to ensure that the transactions being conducted are consistent with the institution's knowledge of the customer, their business and risk profile, including, where necessary, the source of funds. What is a risk-based approach and when does it apply? A risk-based approach means companies should identify, assess, and understand the money laundering and terrorist financial risks of their customer. This is determined by evaluating each individual customer on their own merit, and not using a rule-based approach where all customers are treated the same. Companies should take into account a risk-based approach at the time of setting up their AML policy and procedures, in order to have an effective foundation for their anti-money laundering and counter-financing terrorism program. Most importantly, by having a risk-based approach, companies are able to adjust the level of due diligence required in line with the risk presented by the customer. What documentation do you need to carry out the customer due diligence? Although there is no set list of documentation or information required, as it varies based on the entity type, jurisdiction of where the company is registered in, or being serviced from, as well as the risk rating given to the customer. However, we can look at the key components we need to look out for: customer identity, beneficial ownership, products and services provided. Some of the documentation used to cover customer identity could be certificate of incorporation, articles of memorandum, registration and business address. If the customer is an individual, information such as full name, photographic ID, address, and birth certification would be required. Beneficial ownership information should be determined in line with the risk presented by the customer, meaning the higher the risk, lower the threshold. For example, a higher risk customer should require a 10% beneficial ownership, whereas a low or medium risk customer may require a 25% threshold. Documentation used to determine the ownership can be ownership structure, share registry, annual report. In the scenario where the customer doesn't have ultimate beneficial owners meeting the threshold, it will require to identify the most senior controlling party with the day-to-day control of the company. The last key component of understanding the product and services offered by the customer. This information is key in order to understand if the customer is eligible to be accepted as your client or to understand if it fits with your risk appetite. Documentation used to confirm this item can be articles of memorandum or association. Annual report may highlight this information. Local registries will highlight SIC or the NAICS code. Okay, let's recap. So what is customer due diligence? Customer due diligence, or CDD as it is also known as, is the process and procedures companies follow to gather sufficient information on a new customer or existing customer, and to assess the risks of doing business with them, whether it's at the start of the relationship or once established. Where does the CDD requirement originate from? Financial Action Task Force highlights in Recommendation 10, financial institutions are required to take enough measure to determine they are comfortable and satisfied that they know who the client is before entering into a business relationship. The key components of the CDD requirements are to identify the customer identity, beneficial ownership, and products and services provided. Well, there you have it, a basic introduction to what is customer due diligence, when is it required, and what are the most commonly used documents. Please tell us in the comments section what is your interpretation of customer due diligence. Thank you for watching the video, and if you made it this far, don't forget to like and subscribe to watch more amazing videos.